Good day, beautiful soul family, and welcome back to the miracles beneath the surface. All the honor and all the glory and praise goes to our Heavenly Father in King Yahushua's name. Beautiful soul family, we're going to be discussing emotional intelligence. Now, actually, there's a lot of talk about emotional intelligence, but there's few teachings on being emotionally intelligent. Now, I would say about a week ago, the Most High Yah, He gave me some very interesting insight, and I'm happy that I didn't release it as yet, but it's dealing with emotional development. Sigmund Freud talked about emotional development when the oral is not developed. Certain stages are so important in a child, in a baby, an infant. You know, there's different stages. There's infancy, then from the infancy stage, they continue forth into toddler, so on and so forth. But you see, beautiful soul family, when an infant is growing, it's developing, it's in its process, those are very precious and sensitive times. And you know, Satan starts when we're young, so he brings forth a lot of discord even while the baby is in the womb. Now, the Most High Yah showed me this. It's not so much about when the baby is developing in the womb. It is also about further back. And you may say, well, how far back can we go? Well, we can go back to the zygote stage. You see, beautiful soul family, when there are seeds that are competing to get to the womb of a woman, and Eden, a garden, a place of growth, where it's about Yahuwah and you. Yahuwah is forming. Scripture says Yahuwah knew us before He formed us. What does it mean to know? Okay? It means it's gone through the stages. It's in the knowing. It's not an idea, a thought, a belief. This is a knowing. And our Abba Yah, glory be to the Most High Yah, He knew us before He formed us. We're spiritual beings living this human experience. So, beautiful soul family, it's amazing. But emotional intelligence is not starting where there is the physical, the skin. It's deeper. Emotional pain is deep. Emotional wounds are deep. So emotional intelligence has got to have a more deeper tone, pitch than we can imagine. It's deeper than we think. So, beautiful soul family, the zygotes are competing. They're rushing. One or two are going to be getting it. Let's just say one. And I mentioned this. I mentioned this in one of my books. And it's about twins, that even though they look alike, identical twins, they're different. Right? So let's just deal with one. One gets into the womb. Is able to, it's like, it's the reward. Able to go to a point of transformation from one point to another. And so that's an intelligence. Come on. That's an emotional intelligence. Now, I also talk about emotional intelligence in the Holy Scriptures, and it's in reference to Leah. Now, it's messed up what their father did. It is. But she went through. And when she was having children, they were having children because it's not just one person. When they were having children, she was hoping that this child, maybe I will have his love. Maybe this child will do it. And we're seeing it with the meanings of their names. So all the while, she wasn't really truly feeling love because it really wasn't meant for them to be together. It was a means of a manipulation. And see, the thing is that when we're looking at emotional intelligence and the development of it, we're seeing how it was poorly developed. Pediatrician, when looking at the development of a child, they're going to go through their milestones. How are they growing? How is their building blocks? When I was in school for being a teacher, they talk about scaffolding, and we're going to talk about scaffolding later. But scaffolding, it means scaffolding is about building. So when you're looking at building blocks, you have to have a foundation. With that foundation, then you start to build. Now, we're going to talk about how the wicked are doing that by the means of the bullying spirit. And this is what it's all about. It's about understanding emotional intelligence and the lack of development, which brings forth the spirit, the bullying spirit. Or it pretty much is a breaking in to one's being, that the spirit of bullying charges in. And so I believe strongly that this is something that we can forgive. How can we forgive it? I'm not saying that we're going to let it go, but forgiveness is how we have healing. There are people who don't heal and they become the oppressors. But when you come upon a bullying spirit, it's not to feel any fear, it's not to feel abrupt, but it is about determining how to rise above. It's like the eagle and the crow. So long as the eagle will continue to fly low, the crow will continue to peck her. But when the eagle says, you know what, I'm going to soar high, so high that the crow can't get me, because it's not able to fly. It's not privy to go to those heights. So, beautiful soul family, emotional intelligence is something that it's not talked about a lot. They say we need to have emotional intelligence, but we need to learn the importance and how to utilize it in our life when situations take place. Emotional intelligence says, I'm going to forgive so that I can move forward in healing. The lack of emotional intelligence says, I'm going to hold on to this hurt, and then without them even knowing it, before they realize, they're looking in the mirror and they're looking at the oppressors because they've become it. So you see, it's very important to really get this, because the spirit of bullying, it's like it's been hopping in and out. The reason why it hops in and out of beings is because there is no healing. And as I stated, it's the breaking in. That spirit of bullying breaks in by the means of jealousy and envy, by the means of insecurity. And this is really all, when you look deeper, it's the lack of emotional development. Where there's no development, how can there be any intelligence? How can there be a building? So a person can have intelligence, but they don't have wisdom. And the reason why they don't have wisdom, again, we're going to the scaffolding. There's no foundation, right? And it's the emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence will allow for a person to fear Yahuwah. That's the first type of wisdom. But the emotional intelligence is understanding fear, healthy fear. And you may say, well, there's no healthy fear. Well, fearing Yahuwah, not fearing mankind. And that's another thing. The spirit of bullying. The spirit of bullying will cause a person to be distracted, be irritated. So, and then they start to fear the wrong thing. When you fear Yahuwah, that's a strengthening. Because you're not going to bend your knee to fearing man or its idealistic system. So, going back to the zygote stage, they're all rushing to get into the womb. Only one or two enters in, right? So, at that appointed time, they're all about living, moving forward. And then when one enters in, everything else dies out. And so what's so interesting is that, how can I explain this? When you're looking at it from a zygote stage, and there's all rushing to live that life, and then one enters in and dies off. The rest dies off. Yahuwah was showing me how deep down, when we're not understanding emotional intelligence, we can still see this some way. We can still see this soaring on. How so? Well, Leah, as I mentioned, she wanted the love, the attention, the appreciation from Jacob. But it didn't happen. He loved her in terms of responsibility, but he didn't love her as he loved Rachel. And so this caused turmoil with Joseph and his brothers. Now, I'm sure Joseph didn't do anything wrong to them, but it's a deep-seated hatred. It's a deep-seated disgust. You know, Satan has people, you know, sleeping around, doing so much that when you look at the zygote stage and the competition, it's like, where did it come from? It started as a seed, right? Where did it come from? It comes from a time when they were all rushing to the womb but only one got in. You see, when we're looking at the same ordeal, there's one who is going within and they're building a relationship with Yahuwah, coming to remember, wait a minute, Abba Yah knew me before he formed me. And coming back to that intelligence, emotional intelligence, remembering that sweet love, and being enlightened. And that's a level of growth. So as we're seeing that, and we look at the competition for one's oil, they're wanting to take that oil for themselves, or that energy, and to, like Ahab wanted Naboth's vineyard, but he didn't want to continue the work. He wanted to turn it into something else. He wanted to turn it into a garden. I believe it was a vegetable garden. So you see, they want other energy to bring about what they want, not the divine will of Yahuwah. Now, see and a hearer's here. When there isn't an emotional intelligence, they don't appreciate self. They don't appreciate the womb and the seeds. And like I stated, this is not talked about a lot, but for the seed to be rushing forward to get in, that's an intelligence on its own, an emotional intelligence. And when it's not, it's like when something is not aware, then it definitely doesn't get developed. It's not aware. We're not aware because, as I mentioned, in Asian countries, when the child is born, they're not saying 1 year, they're saying 2 years. They count the growing stages of the womb. So, beautiful soul family, I know that seems very deep and very out there, but when you really think about it and meditate on it, it's not out there. There's a whole emotional intelligence that we are not tapping into, that we are not being aware of. And so that type of lack does bring forth a hindrance. It prevents a person from growing emotionally. And then scaffolding is still taking place, but not in a healthy way. As I mentioned, I learned about scaffolding when I was becoming a teacher. Scaffolding, in a good sense, is growth from levels. And you are able to move forward and growing in the healthy sense. But when there is growth or a hindrance, it's not, you can't really say that, there's a growth, but if it's not healthy, then that means they're moving on from wicked to vicious, which only speeds up their non-existence. So the whole point about growth is to have existence. So it has to be healthy. We don't want there to be a growth of an unhealthy mind, body, and soul want there to be healthy growth, because healthy growth is not only just about self, but it's also about the people that we interact with. Henceforth, the bullying spirit. Now, the bullying spirit, we have every right not to forgive, but it's not just about what we're giving out, but it's about what we're receiving. As I've mentioned, forgiveness is not just sending out, it's about receiving healing. It's about coming out of a cycle. Being able to forgive prevents a person from becoming their oppressor. You know, there are, and you know what, high school is such a cesspool, but it is a place where social skills are being developed. And sadly, you know, there are children who believe that that is the age to give up their virginity, and it's not. Not at a point where they do not have a development of emotional intelligence. So the lack of development of emotional intelligence leads into insecurity. Low self-confidence. When a person has the lack of self-confidence, they need to be validated by others. They will go outside of self. They will be reaching for things outside of self, wanting to be like others, looking outside of self to see what they can take. You know, and so really that's that transference that's going on. A bully has become the oppressor. So at one point in their life, usually when they were young, especially if they have a lack of emotional development, they will carry on certain generational curses. You know, they're not breaking no chains because there's no emotional intelligence being taught. It's like an inheritance that's not passed down. Now, when we look at the bullying spirit, it's something lacked. So I know that I've said a lot here. I want to continue forth at a later time, but emotional intelligence is something that needs to be broken because there needs to be healing in that area. Once there's healing in that area, then it decreases the amount of people being broken, which causes them to be their oppressors. And a field day for the spirit of bullying.